Welcome to another session with us today on written African poetry. Today we're considering post-apartheid voices in poetry, and this is a sequel to our previous topic, which was apartheid poetry in South Africa. Today, our objectives are quite um, simple, which is to explain what post-apartheid voices is. We are going to consider the significance of post-apartheid voices. We'll look into the historical context and some of the major themes in post-apartheid poetry. With this objective, it is believed that at the end of this video, you will be able to understand what post-apartheid voices in terms of poems is all about. What is post-apartheid voices? Post-apartheid voices is a collection of narratives that emerged to show the transition between apartheid to democracy. These voices used their individual stories, collective memories, and selected societal reflections in shaping the discourse during post-apartheid. Most of the time, the poems that were performed individually or written was used as a form of expressing marginalized or silenced voices during apartheid. This just explains to us that the voices that emerged after apartheid, which was a period of institutionalized segregation and racial discrimination, the voices that came out after apartheid was reflecting some of the experiences that the survivors of apartheid had gone through, and it also reflects the collective memories, things that everybody had experienced together, you know, and how society had handled those events, which is what has shaped the conversations after apartheid in South Africa. You need to remember that these poems or any written work or creative performances after apartheid is one of the conversations that has to happen, because after every major event, people in that particular region would have to discuss how the event that had happened in the past is shaping their new reality. Significance of post-apartheid voices in poetry. One, it produced authentic depiction of personal experiences, and this helped in humanizing the historical events during apartheid and post-apartheid. By with saying that it produced authentic depictions of personal experiences and it helps in humanizing the historical event, it means that the stories, the poems that are written came out for individuals that experienced the event or the era of apartheid. And so there was a first-hand depiction of experiences, events of what happened during apartheid. This wasn't a story of two generations after. It was a story, or it was there were poems that were written by by people who had seen and experienced apartheid firsthand, and they are also experiencing life after apartheid. So they have a lot to say. They have a lot to compare. That during apartheid, what happened, and after apartheid, what happened? What do we have? What have we benefited from apartheid, or how has apartheid affected us? Now that we're no longer in apartheid, we're now experiencing the democratic system of government. How or how what is the difference between the experience between these two era? Then two, it brought about dialogue about reconciliation, justice, and societal healing. Nobody goes to war and come out without any form of injury. Likewise, most survivors of apartheid had experienced apartheid firsthand, the segregation, the injustice, the maltreatment, and all of that. Now they are experiencing democracy. How can they reconcile the past with the present so that the future can be certain? And how do they gain justice for the injustice that they've experienced during apartheid? Now we're calling for societal healing. So these voices are a reflection of all of this of what we are calling here is the significance of post-apartheid voices, because the third thing that we have to consider is that it fostered artistic expressions that challenged collective memory and promoted critical reflection. Now, beyond what everybody has experienced, which is what we call collective memory, beyond all the experiences, be whether good or bad, and it is mainly bad, beyond all of these experiences, how has poets or writers, but we're focusing on poems this time around, poets, how have they been able to use their expressions, their writings, to promote critical reflections that goes beyond just being emotional? So these poets have been able to use their voice to challenge the situations that are ongoing even in the post-apartheid South Africa. The historical context in which post-apartheid voices emerged also has to be considered. It is important that you know that post-African voices emerged as a response to apartheid. The poems addresses issues that challenge the past injustice as they navigate a new era. Below gives some historical perspective for post-apartheid voices. 1. Survivors shared their stories of suffering and resilience. Poets and others explored themes of trauma, reconciliation, and identity, and there was a collective grappling with racial discrimination. Through this, you can see that the historical context behind these voices was born out of survivors wanting to share their story of how they experienced apartheid and how they survived apartheid. Then poets use their poems to explore themes of trauma, reconciliation, and identity. Then they move forward to how can they grapple or how can they handle the situation of racial discrimination. Having considered the significance, having considered the significance and the historical context in which post-apartheid voices emerged, we will now look at some of the major themes that can be found in some of the poems that reflect post-apartheid voices. One of the major themes you will find in these poems is reflection of trauma and healing, the importance of memory in shaping identity and history, nation building and reconciliation, and disillusionment. Let's consider reflection of trauma and healing. These poets' post-apartheid poems examine the psychological effect of apartheid on its victims. It considers how they are able to confront their pain, suffering, injustice, and come to a place where healing is needed for growth. Though some of the post-apartheid poems, poets advocate for healing by acknowledging the realities of past events and how they can forge ahead. In terms of collective memory and identity, collective memory serves as a library or archive for shared experiences and at the same time help in shaping the narratives around nation building. Memory here calls for the recognition of what had happened during apartheid and how it has shaped the identity of the survivors. We now consider disillusionment. Disillusionment, this is the expression of dissatisfaction experienced by the survivors of apartheid who thought that the abolition of apartheid and a transition into democracy would create better living conditions for them. The disappointment experience led to a sense of disillusionment. These are the major themes available when we talk about the themes of some of the poets that emerged after apartheid. With this, it is believed that you, as the audience, will be able to read post-apartheid poems and discover some of these themes and identify some of these themes in the poems. Let's now look at an activity for you. What is your take about post-apartheid voices? Consider some of the poems we'll be discussing later on in class and use that as a reference to see if what your take about post-apartheid voices are. Have they been able to achieve the goal they set out to achieve? Do these voices actually reflect the experience of post-apartheid situations? Let's now move on to the task. Let's put it into practice. How has memory been used by poets in post-apartheid poetry? This is very crucial to our conversation today. How has memory been used by poets in post-apartheid poetry? And that brings us to the end of today's video. Remember, today we considered post-apartheid voices in poetry. And some of our objectives remain explaining what post-apartheid voices is, considering the significance of post-apartheid voices, looking at the historical context and some of the major themes in post-apartheid poetry. Thank you for listening to me today. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye for now.